What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Savage Rounds with Xavier. This is episode 20. Today for you, I've got UFC 290 Volkanovski versus Rodriguez. We've got the predictions and the breakdown. We've got a great card, as you can see here. Like I said, Volkan, Yair, Brandon Moreno, Pantoja 2. Technically 3 because they fought on The Ultimate Fighter quite some time ago in like 2016. So they're going at it again. Rob versus Drickus. Yeah, top to bottom, there's some good fights. Let's get into it, though. We'll kick it off. We've got Cam Kirk versus Esteban Ribovics. I spelled Ribovics wrong there, but oh well. Cam Kirk, 12-5, 5'10", 75-inch reach, 29 years old, 3-2 in his last 5, 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a round 2 submission loss versus Damon Jackson in March of last year, so it's been a bit over a year since he's fought last. On the Ribovic side, he is 11-1, also 5'10". Much shorter reach there, 69-inch reach, 27 years old, 4-1 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 0-1 in the UFC. That UFC loss was his last fight, which was a unanimous decision loss versus Loic Radzhabov in March of this year, so he's fought a whole lot more recently. And Loic Radzhabov is a really tough opponent for your first UFC fight, even though it was his debut as well. He's just a really experienced guy, fought a lot of good guys, done quite a bit, but yeah, Ribovics looked good versus Loic in that one. He had some struggles with the takedowns, but that was going to be obvious in that fight. On the feet, he was able to do good. Late into the third, he hurt Radzhabov, and he was able to steal a round, ends up losing 29-28, I believe. So he was able to put on a pretty solid performance versus a guy who was always going to cause him a lot of troubles with the grappling. Cam Kirk on the other side, solid grappler. He's got his BJJ black belt. Not the best wrestler in general. It's okay. He can be taken down and held down. And sometimes he does have trouble with the takedowns himself, but it's not awful. On the feet, he's not a bad striker either, to be honest, but it's another thing where it's not great. It's okay. Not the most powerful. Doesn't have great speed. Decent technique. Throws good kicks, but he has periods of inactivity. His volume isn't great. He doesn't throw a lot. And Ribovics is a guy where I think his grappling is good enough. He showed it versus Radzhabov. He wasn't getting finished versus a guy who's a much better wrestler. Maybe not the same jiu-jitsu level. To be honest, I'm not even quite sure to comment on Radzhabov's jiu-jitsu off the top of my head, but I'm not sure if he has a black belt or not exactly, but did decent on the ground there, and he does have the good wrestling, which I talked about. And then on the ground, I feel like he'll be able to make Cam Kirk pay while he's trying to come in to get the fight to the ground, or even just doing a little striking of his own. He'll be the much quicker striker, much more powerful. He puts together combinations better, and the countering is where I think he'll really be able to do good versus Cam Kirk, because he's there to be hit. Like I said, his striking defense isn't the best. When it's on the ground, I think he'll be able to do well enough to get up. Obviously, the submission threat for Kirk is there, but I do think Ribovics will be able to get up, and as the fight goes along, Kirk may start to tire. We can see Esteban start to stuff takedowns more and more, continue to land on the feet, and he may even get Kirk out of there early doing good work on the feet, regardless of where or when he gets it done. I think Ribovics is going to be the one to take this fight. Bets that you could consider for this one, I like Ribovics at -145. I know a lot of people took Cam Kirk. I saw it on Twitter everywhere. People brought this line down quite a bit. If you're a Ribovics bettor, it's much better than it was earlier. I want to say it was around 170 earlier, maybe even close to -200, but a lot of people taking him for that grappling upside, but I think people are sleeping on Ribovics grappling himself. The under 2.5 is sitting at -185. I do think Ribovics will be able to get Kirk out of there, and his KO line is sitting at +155, which if he does get him out of there, I do think that's how. I'm not sure if I'll be putting a bet on him quite yet. You can always check my bets on Twitter. But pick-wise, I do like I do like Esteban Ribovics in this first fight. Next up on the card, Shannon Ross versus Jesus Aguilar. Shannon Ross is 13-7, 5'6", 66-inch reach, 34 years old, 2-3 in his last 5, with a Contender Series loss, and he's 0-1 in the UFC as well. His last fight was that UFC loss, a round 1 KO TKO loss versus Clayton Rodriguez in February of this year, where he was just completely outmatched on the feet. He didn't get to do any work. It didn't look like he was in the fight at all. Jesus Aguilar, 8-2, 5'4", 62-inch reach, 27 years old, 4-1 in his last 5, with a win on Contender Series, and he's also 0-1 in the UFC. His last fight was also the loss in UFC. It was a round 1 submission loss versus Tatsuro Taira, also in February of this year. 2 really tough debuts for these guys. I believe Shannon Ross just ended up getting the chance because, if I'm not mistaken, that was the card in Australia. So they brought a bunch of the Australian guys out. Shannon Ross getting his chance there. But like I said, Clayton Rodriguez, a tough debut opponent for anyone. Tatsuro Taira, a tough debut opponent for anyone. In this one, this is kind of a weird fight because I don't think either guy is great. I don't think either guy has a super high ceiling. Obviously, Shannon Ross has no wins in the UFC at all, and he's an older guy for sure. He's been taking a lot of big shots, and he doesn't react to them well anymore, at least. And Jesus Aguilar, although his striking isn't technically great at all, he's got a lot of power, and he wings big punches, and he's going to go in for the takedowns, you know that. He might not always get them to the ground, but he's going to work the takedowns no matter what. A guillotine specialist, I would say. He's always looking to set that one up. Sometimes it can be to his own detriment, ending up on the bottom, going for it. But pick-wise, I'm just going to edge it to Jesus Aguilar. I think he can bring forward pressure, swinging those big, giant overhands, winging the big punches at Shannon Ross. Maybe he can clip him, maybe not. But regardless, winging the punches, getting in close, and shooting takedowns, I think he can get the win over 3 rounds. Whether he gets the finish or not, I'm not sure. And betting-wise, I'm completely staying away from this one. I'm not even thinking about anything for this fight. But yeah, pick-wise, I'm going Jesus Aguilar. Not confidently, though. Next up, a prospect I'm really excited to see. We all wanted to see him fight Christian Rodriguez, but wasn't able to make it to the octagon, so we get Terrence Mitchell instead. But Terrence Mitchell. Simon is undefeated, 8-0, 5'8", 67-inch reach, 22 years old, 5-0 in his last 5 as he's undefeated. A Contender Series win, and he's 2-0 in the UFC. His last fight was a majority decision win versus Manny Martinez in March of this year. Terrence Mitchell, 15-2, 5'10". I didn't see a reach stat for him. 33 years old, 5-0 in his last 5. This is his UFC debut. His last fight was a round 1 submission win versus Christian Alexander for the so it was in April of this year, and it's like the Alaskan I can't even remember what it stands for, but it's an Alaskan fight promotion. It was for the title. He did win it. Like it says there, round 1 submission. This fight, I think, on short notice, Cameron Simon is a tough opponent for anyone, no matter how long the camp, but especially on short notice in your debut, when you're not a primary striker. I think Cameron Simon is definitely a tough matchup, unless you're a true elite wrestler or grappler. Terrence Mitchell has good submissions. He can lock you up on the ground. He's really long. Tall guy for the division, 5'10". But I just think on the feet he's going to be at quite a big deficit. Cameron Simon may not have crazy knockout power, but his combinations are so crisp and quick, precise. His technique is great. I'm not gonna put it to the same effect as I would say Sean O'Malley, but Sean O'Malley strikes in that kind of way. It's not power that's putting you on, although he doesn't have bad power, but it's his speed and timing and technique. He's hitting you in the right spot on the button to put you out. Simon, maybe not to the same effect, but kind of does the same thing when he's putting people out. It's because of how many times he's hit you, how fast he is, how precise he is, the technique. He's that kind of striker, and he's got solid offensive wrestling and grappling as well. We've seen him Let me pull up who his last 2 fights were. I know he fought Steven Kozlow not too long ago. I can't remember if that was his last fight or not. Oh, no, the Manny Martinez one, obviously. But we saw Steven Kozlow getting him on the ground in danger at points, taking his back, but Simon was always able to survive and scramble out of it. Did well to get back up to his feet, to get back striking where he primarily wants to be, against a guy who wants to be on the ground. Terrence Mitchell, like I said, a grappler, long, good jiu-jitsu, good submissions, but he might not be the best at getting the fight to the ground where he wants it. So I think if Simon can stay off the ground, and I mean, even Terrence Mitchell can be taken down and held down. It's been done before. There's been points where he's been held down. I think Simon dictates where this fight takes place because of his wrestling ability, and how good he is on the feet. So I like Cameron Simon to get this one done. I would say a finish. Playing the under, it's under 1.5. I wouldn't say I'm confident in him getting a finish that quick, because I think Terrence Mitchell is decent. I think he can maybe tie Simon up in a clinch, trying to get the fight to the ground, just in spaces like that. But when they're striking, I think Simon will be able to tag him up over the course of a couple rounds. Maybe it gets to the third, maybe it doesn't, but I think Simon can get him out of there. Simon's money line is sitting at minus 550. That's a little steep. Even though I'm quite confident in him. I do think he'll get this win. It's just minus 550, not worth paying. Simon KO, plus 140. I do think there is a world where Simon can end up winning a decision. Terrence Mitchell maybe toughed it out. He's been knocked out before, so I'm definitely leaning submission, but it's just at minus 140. It's not something I'm like dying to play. And then the under 1.5, like I said, it's sitting at minus 175. I could see it going like a late second round finish, even into the third round, or a decision. So those are the ones I was looking at, but I'll end up staying away most likely. But pick-wise, I definitely like Simon in this one. Next up, Vitor Petrino, Marcin Prachnio. I really like Vitor Petrino. He's a good prospect. Right now, he's sitting at 8-0, 6'2", 77-inch reach, 25 years old, 5-0 in his last 5 as he is undefeated. A Contender Series win, 1-0 in the UFC, and that win was his last fight, unanimous decision win versus Anton Turkalj in March of this year. Marcin Prachnio on the other side, 16-6, 6'3", 74-inch reach, 34 years old, 3-2 in his last 5. His last fight, a unanimous decision win versus William Knight in February of this year. I actually did pick William Knight to win that fight. Obviously, it did not end up going that way. I want to say William Knight. I was looking at the strike total earlier, when I was just looking at all the fights for today or for this weekend and stuff like that. He threw like 8 total strikes or something. I don't know if that was the significant strike line or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was just the total strikes. It felt like he did nothing in that fight. That was the one right before he got axed from the UFC. He literally did nothing. So Marcin Prachnio was free to beat up his leg and just kind of dance around the outside and point to an easy victory. Petrino looked good in his Contender Series win. Got the big knockout versus, I think his name's Bellato. It was the second time fighting him. He knocked him out early in his career. It might have been his debut. If it wasn't, it was just early in his career. Knocked him out then, too. They meet again on Contender Series. Finishes him in the second round with a big punch. It was a big knockout. Just needed one. And comes in on his UFC debut. Faces a grappler who has fought Jailton Almeida already at this point, I believe. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure at that point he had fought. You know what? Let me check just to make sure I'm not saying random things. Vitor Turkalj. Yeah, he had fought Jailton Almeida at this point already. So he's been in there with really good guys. And Vitor Petrino, typically known as your big power puncher, going for knockouts. No submissions on his record, 6 knockouts out of 8 wins. And he goes out there and does really well to win what little bit happens on the feet and out-wrestle the grappler. It was pretty good. It might not have been like big fight IQ moments. There were times where I think he could have kept it standing and possibly gotten a finish, but it was just showing an improvement in his grappling. His wrestling's definitely getting better, and we know what he can do on the feet. I think in this fight, Prachnio will try and throw his leg kicks and get in there, and he can land big punches. He does tend to get sucked into brawls sometimes, but after how he fought against William Knight, who wasn't throwing anything back at him, I would be surprised if he didn't fight not in a brawl against Petrino. So if he's trying to outpoint Petrino, I could see him going in there, throwing leg kicks, jumping in to throw shots, and he leaves his chin up there to get hit and getting completely knocked out, chinned by Petrino. I think the takedowns are there for him too if he needs them. I do think he'll have, if he can get top position on Prachnio, I believe he can have the advantage, and he can get good control time there, maybe get off some ground and pound if he's continuing to improve in that area. But I do like Petrino to find the knockout in this one. I think when they're on the feet, he'll be able to land a big shot at some point. Prachnio's been knocked out before, so that wouldn't surprise me. Petrino's sitting at minus 265 there. It's obviously not the best line, but there aren't a lot of great lines. A lot of them have been juiced up pretty hard on this card. So I don't think Petrino's bad for a parlay. If you're looking to parlay a couple guys, it's not awful. I do kind of think it's not like they're giving Petrino a can, but I do think they want him to win this match. This fight. They're giving him a fight. They know he can find the knockout in and possibly use grappling. They want him to do well. He's a good prospect. So I think a parlay at minus 265 isn't awful. The under 1.5 at minus 140. If he does use the grappling, I could see this being maybe a little bit later into the second round or in the third. But he does have a lot of early knockouts in his career, so the under 1.5 at minus 140 isn't awful. And his KO line is sitting at minus 160, so the world is kind of expecting the KO in this fight. I might not touch the KO just because it's at minus 160. That's kind of a crazy line to pay for a KO prop, but pick-wise, definitely going with Petrino here. Next up, we've got a catchweight fight of 130 pounds. Tatsuro Taira was supposed to fight last weekend versus Clayton Rodriguez. Rodriguez couldn't make it to the cage. They delay it a week and pull in Edgar Chairez on short notice to take on Tatsuro Taira. Chairez has a loss on Contender Series, and he's won a few fights since then. He's on a decent little streak. He lost his Contender Series fight to Clayton Carpenter, who's done decent in the UFC so far, just lost to William Gomez, who is a decent fighter himself. But Tatsuro Taira, 13-0, 5'7", 70-inch reach, 23 years old. He's undefeated, so 5-0 in his last 5, 3-0 in the UFC. His last fight was a round 1 submission win versus Jesus Aguilar, who we talked about earlier. He's fighting on this card. That was in February of this year. Edgar Chairez, 10-4, 5'7", 72-inch reach, 27 years old, 4-1 in his last 5. That loss being the Contender Series fight versus Clayton Carpenter, and his last fight was a round 4 submission win versus Gianni Vasquez for the Fury FC belt in March of this year. I think the line is crazy on this one, plus 725. I do think the line is like that because it's a short notice fight for Chairez, but this isn't like Taira, I would say, having to weight cut last week and getting called in versus another opponent. It's not I think Edgar having to cut weight on short notice and Taira having to cut weight twice within 2 weeks, it'll be tough for both of them. So I think the line is a bit disrespectful towards Chairez. If you like the Chairez bet, it's definitely favoring you a lot. But Chairez is a great striker, good offensive wrestling. His jiu-jitsu himself is pretty good. His gas tank isn't awful, but he can tire as the fight goes on. Taira, he's been phenomenal in the UFC so far. He's had a few moments where Jesus Aguilar had him in a spot where he could have gone a guillotine. He was never really in too much danger. He was able to just kind of wait it out and get out of there. So we've seen him face a bit of not too much, but a tiny bit of adversity in a few fights in the UFC so far. Dealt with it well. We know his wrestling's elite. I don't know if I can say elite yet. For who he's faced, his wrestling is very good so far. We've yet to see him versus somebody else of an elite level, but we'll have to see that. But for what we've seen so far, his wrestling's great. offensively. He has good sweeps from the bottom and stuff. Jiu-jitsu is great, as we've seen. He has a few submissions in the UFC so far. And it's kind of like how I talked about it last week. Clayton was the better striker on the feet, also with okay takedowns, not the best takedown defense. I would say Chairez is the better grappler out of Clayton and him. I'd say Chairez is a bit better in that front. But Clayton has decent jiu-jitsu himself. And I still pick Tyra to win that one, even though he's better on the feet. I think Clayton could have had success, and Tyra would be able to land a few shots too, with Clayton definitely winning the exchanges on the feet. But just over time, Tyra able to get the fight to the ground and win minutes and possibly find the submission. I think the story is kind of the same here. I'd say Clayton was the better striker, so it's kind of like a trade-off. I'd say Chairez is a bit better of a grappler, especially defensive-wise, maybe like takedown defense-wise specifically, even though I think he'll be taken down here. But and then Clayton, they're both good strikers, though, and Chairez is specifically pretty powerful. Not that Clayton isn't, but I think Chairez can be successful on the feet, and if he can hurt Tyra early, he can do good work, but it's going to be tough over time. I think it's the same story. Tyra can land his striking too. He's slowly getting better on the feet. Decent kickboxing. He even hurt Candelario in his first UFC fight. I think he can do okay on the feet with Chairez winning exchanges, doing well, but the grappling of Tyra I think is so good. He'll be able to get the fight down to the ground, win minutes, if not, find a submission. I do like the over 1.5 line. It's sitting at plus 105 right now. I think you can take a good shot there. Obviously, if Tyra can find his back early, there's always the chance for a submission, but I think Chairez can do solid enough work on the feet where the fight can extend for a bit and maybe see late in the second, maybe even into the third, who knows, but I don't think that's a bad shot. Tyra decision sitting at plus 500. Edgar's a decent grappler himself. Maybe he's able to handle himself and find the decision. Who knows? I know there will definitely be people putting a little bit of money on the Chairez money line just because of it sitting at plus 725. It is kind of crazy. But obviously the submission is there for Tyra. I didn't write down the line. I probably should have. But betting-wise, I may take something. I may not. I'm not quite sure yet. Always check Twitter for that. But pick-wise, going with Tatsuro Taira. Next up, light heavyweights. We've got a rematch. Jimmy Crute versus Alonzo Menafield. Crute is 12-3-1, 6'2", 74-inch reach, 27 years old, 2-2-1 in his last 5. And his last fight was a draw versus Alonzo Menafield. I just said that. It was in February of this year. Alonzo Menafield, 13-3-1, 6 feet tall, 76-inch reach, 35 years old, 3-1-1. Obviously, his last fight was that draw versus his opponent now, Jimmy Crute. This is an interesting one because when they're grappling, Jimmy Crute's winning. When they're striking, Alonzo Menafield's winning. Obviously, the striking tends to deal more damage unless you're getting off good ground and pound. But Alonzo Menafield hurts Crute multiple times. Looks like he's on the way to winning a decision because Jimmy Crute's somehow able to survive. But Menafield ends up grabbing the fence, losing a point. Still winning on one of the judges' scorecards, 29-27, but 2 judges score 28-28, so we get a majority draw. I picked Alonzo Menafield the first time, and I believe I'm going to switch my pick. I think the younger guy, Jimmy Crute, can always get better and build game plans better. He was doing so well in the grappling, but decided to strike for little bits and pieces. Obviously, Menafield, he didn't get taken down every single time he shot. Jimmy Crute got hurt, so it was a little bit difficult after that, even though he was getting takedowns after he was hurt. But Alonzo was able to stuff some at times. I think Jimmy Crute's going to have a super grappling-focused game plan. I don't think he's going to play in the striking as much as he did last time. He's going to be super careful and come out really wrestling heavy. I think there's even potential for the submission. Obviously, if Menafield, he'll be expecting it. But I just think Jimmy Crute's the superior grappler, and he'll be able to get the fight to the ground. He'll do it earlier this time. He'll wear on Menafield, try and make him tired. He submitted Paul Craig on the ground, and that's obviously not an easy thing to do. Paul Craig has submitted so many good fighters, and for Crute to do that himself is pretty crazy. I think the submission's there for Jimmy Crute if he can get this to the ground and wear on Menafield. Obviously, the decision's there if he can just continue to win minutes, but I do think the submission is open. I'm going with Jimmy Crute here. I'm switching my pick from the last fight. Crute, minus 125. I think he was kind of betted to a favorite. People are bet to a favorite. People. He was the underdog at first, opened as, and I'm not 100% sure. I just feel like Alonzo was the favorite earlier in the week. But Crute got a lot of action this week, and now is sitting at around minus 125. The under 2.5 is at minus 275. That's crazy. If Jimmy Crute is dominant in the wrestling and not able to find the submission, I do think there's a world where Crute can win by decision. And obviously, we saw last fight it went to decision, so Jimmy Crute is always there to tough it out. It's a possibility, even if Menafield's winning. That Crute sub line is sitting at 325. I didn't write down the decision line. I should have, but Crute sub, Crute decision. I'm on the Crute side. There's a few good bets to look at here. I'm not sure if I will take one yet or what I do, but definitely going with Crute for my pick here. Next up, we get a women's strawweight bout. Yasmin Jauregui, Denise Gomez. I'm actually really excited for that. Jauregui is one of my favorite women's prospects right now. I don't know if you can call Manon Fiorot a prospect anymore, considering her next fight is against Rose Namajunas in a title eliminator. But Fiorot is probably my favorite woman fighter at the moment, and Jauregui, my favorite prospect. Jauregui sitting undefeated, 10-0, 5'3", 64-inch reach, 24 years old. Obviously, 5-0 in her last 5. She's undefeated. 2-0 in the UFC so far. Her last fight in December of last year was a round 2 KO TKO versus Estela Nunes, good striker herself, so that was a good win. She did get dropped in that fight. I'll talk about that in a second. Denise Gomez, 7-2, 5'2", 63-inch reach, 23 years old. So 2 really young, good women's prospects facing off early in their career. 4-1 in her last 5, a Contender Series win, 1-1 in the UFC so far. Her last fight was April of this year, not too long ago, a round 2 KO TKO win versus Bruna Brazil. It was a great finish versus another prospect in the women's division, like I said, Bruna Brazil. But like I said, with Jauregui, she got hurt versus Nunes early, was able to rally back and do really well to put good shots of her own on Nunes and get the win. Her striking is great. She throws beautiful combinations with her hands and finishes a lot of them with a good leg kick. Her boxing is so good. She might not be one punch power, but the volume she puts out and the technique, the precision, the speed which she throws at, it definitely all melds together, and knockouts are definitely possible for her, even at the strawweight division, just because of how technical and fast and the volume she puts out, like I said. Denise Gomez on the other side, we saw her versus Bruna Brazil. She likes to move forward, be aggressive, throw big shots. She's not as technical as Jauregui, but I would say she has more of that one-punch power. Jauregui's been hurt before. There is a world where Gomez goes out there and hurts Jauregui early and can get her out, but I favor Jauregui here. I just think we've seen her get back up from big shots if she does eat one, but I think she's just so much more technical than Gomez. Even Estela Nunes, more technical striker than Denise Gomez. I think that's why she was able to find the shot on Jauregui. Gomez's striking is good, but definitely more wild and power-based. So Gomez will be winging big shots. I think she'll be able to land shots, but I think it'll be stuff Jauregui can handle. She'll come back, slowly outpace her in this fight, outvolume her. It'll just add up as she goes on, landing good kicks, good shots to both levels with the hands. And like I said, just outpressure and outpace her. Denise will eat shots coming forward because she's so aggressive. Both women have solid offensive grappling, but both can be taken down and held down as well. But I won't say held down. I don't know. They can both do good work off their back too to get up, but they can both be taken down, and minutes can be won against them. But on the feet, like I said, I like Jauregui to win by just outpacing her over time and possibly overwhelming her to find the finish late in the second, maybe in the third. I think there are some good lines for Horegi here. The decision is also there because Denise Gomez is tough, but she's been finished before on the feet. Horegi sitting at minus 350. I probably won't be playing that money line. It's a pretty big price to pay in women's MMA, and women's MMA is pretty volatile, and with two good prospects like this, the line may be much wider than it should be. We don't know. That's why these two prospects are facing off. The under is sitting at 2.5, plus 135. I think that could be a solid line. Like I said, Horegi could outpace and outwork and overwhelm her with volume and end up hurting Denise as the fight goes on, and the possibility for Denise to land the big shot is there. So plus 135 I wouldn't say is a bad number. I've seen some people looking at the under for this fight. It's not a bad line. Horegi KO sitting at plus 185. I am on the Horegi side. I do think she'll be able to find the finish. Like I said, I like the round 2, round 3 kind of look. Round 2 KO is sitting at plus 550. Round 3 KO is sitting at plus 800. So maybe a little sprinkles there if you're on the same side. I'm not sure what I'll be doing yet, but definitely pick-wise, I'm going with Horegi in this one. Another fight we have here, welterweight prelim, JDM, Jack Della Maddalena versus Josiah Harrell. Taking this fight on short notice with... Man, he was supposed to fight Sean Brady. That would have been an interesting fight. I saw some people taking the underdog in Sean Brady, but he wasn't able to make it to the cage, so we get Josiah Harrell, like I said, on short notice. Maddalena sitting at 14-2, 5'11", 73-inch reach, 26 years old, 5-0 in his last 5, a Contender Series win, and 4-0 so far in the UFC. His last fight was a round 1 submission win versus Randy Brown in February of this year. Josiah Harrell, 7-0, undefeated, 5'7", 67-inch reach, 24 years old. Obviously, in his last 5, he's 5-0 as he's undefeated. This is his UFC debut on short notice, like I said. His last fight was a round 3 KO TKO win versus Michael Roberts, who is 1-3, so he wasn't facing the best competition where he was fighting. And that was very recently, just last month, the 16th of June, 2023. So he hasn't had a lot of time to heal up and rest. But he had a viral clip from that fight where he shot a takedown and literally ran his opponent through the gate door. I don't know if it wasn't locked all the way or if it broke or something, but he ran his opponent through the door out of the cage. Who knows? Maybe that's why he got the call. Obviously, he's undefeated, so he's a solid prospect. Good wrestling, good grappling. But I do think Jack Della Maddalena is a tough opponent on short notice. He is huge compared to Josiah Harrell. 4-inch height advantage, 6-inch reach advantage. JDM, solid grappler himself defensively. We've seen him stuff takedowns. We've seen him get taken down. But when he gets taken down, he's always able to get himself out of trouble and pop back up. On the feet, his boxing is, wow. People always talk about how good it is. Some people are already comparing him with some of the best boxing in the UFC. I really do think he'll be able to stuff takedowns from the short notice opponent, Josiah Harrell, which is going to be his game plan, and then land big shots on the feet. I do think he'll get him out of here at some point. Lines are so big, I don't know if it's worth taking anything, to be honest. Obviously, the JDM line is crazy. I'm sitting at minus 950 right now. I'm not touching that. Under 1.5, sitting at minus 275. I do think it probably doesn't get out of the first round. But if you think Harrell can, survive, cause a little disruption with his wrestling, the over 1.5 is sitting at plus 215. So if you trust him to get out of the first and maybe survive a bit, that plus 215 isn't looking too bad. But JDM inside the distance is even sitting at minus 450. Betting wise, I'm not touching anything. I do think the under probably hits, but like I said, sitting at minus 275, crazy. I'm not touching it. JDM wins this fight. That's my pick, probably by knockout. Next up, I believe this is the last prelim. We've got Ruthless Robbie Lawler versus Nico Price. Robbie Lawler in his retirement fight, and there were some great opponents for great matchups you could pick, and Nico Price is definitely a guy that'll give him a fun bang it out war for his last matchup in the UFC. Robbie Lawler sitting at 29-16, 5'11", 74-inch reach, 41 years old, 1-4 in his last 5. His last fight being a round 2 KO TKO loss versus Bryan Barberena just about a month ago, not exactly, but just about in same month of last year, July. Nico Price on the other side, 15-6, 6 feet tall, 76-inch reach, 33 years old, 1-3-1 in his last 5. His last fight being a round 3 KO TKO loss versus Phil Rowe in December of last year. Both guys in fights where they looked good early and were doing good work on the feet early, but just ended up eating a big shot as the fight went on and getting finished. With Robbie Lawler, it just seems at this point in his career we've seen the crazy amount of wars he's been into. There have been so many where he's dishing out crazy beatdowns but also eating big shots and still winning. So all those wars add up. He, at this point in his career, this age, doesn't react to shots the same as he used to. So he's doing good work against Bryan Barberena. I believe he even hurt him at some point, and Bryan Barberena was kind of able to outlast that. Robbie starts to slow down. He gets hit with a big shot. Like I said, doesn't react the same anymore. And it's just a downfall from there. Bryan Barberena was able to take over and get him out. With Nico Price, obviously not at the same stage in his career, but same kind of story in the fight. Was doing well through 2 rounds. There's a very big shout for him to be on his way to a decision if he wasn't able to get Phil Rowe out in the 3rd round. He could have been up 2-0. You never know. But he starts to slow down in the 3rd round. His gas tank's giving out on him after doing good work through the first 2. Phil's able to land a big shot and really put it on Nico Price for a bit and get him out in the 3rd round. This is a fight where I think both guys are going to come out swinging and throw big shots and do good work early. But it's just about the points they're at in their career. I think early in the rounds, Nico will be able to handle the big shots better. Obviously, Robbie Lawler can knock anyone out, so and we've seen Nico Price get knocked out, so the knockout is there for Robbie Lawler early. But I just think at this point in his career, Robbie Lawler will be able to dish out some good shots, but once he starts to eat big shots back, and Nico Price will land and throw big shots on Robbie Lawler, he won't react to them as well as he used to. It'll be the downfall, and I think Robbie Lawler probably doesn't make it to decision. I think Nico Price will get him out of there at some point in the 2nd or the 3rd. Robbie's tough though, so you never know. Maybe he can come out and get a victory in his last fight. I'll definitely be rooting for him, but I just see Nico Price getting it done here. Bet-wise, I am not touching this fight. I'm going to sit back and watch Robbie Lawler in his last fight. Next up, we get to the main card. Another short notice replacement here. There have been a few on this card so far. First fight on the main card, we have one here. Bo Nickel versus Val Woodburn. Bo Nickel, 4-0, 6'1", 76-inch reach, 27 years old. He doesn't even have a last 5 fights. He's only had 4 professional fights, but in them he's 4-0, 2 of them being Contender Series wins, and he is 1-0 in the UFC. So 3 out of his 4 professional fights are with the UFC in some capacity. His last fight was a round 1 submission versus Jamie Pickett in March of this year, which some people thought he didn't look at his best. He which is, kind of wild to say, considering it was a first round submission. But he was struggling to get a takedown early on, and it kind of looked like he needed a knee to the groin to get him to the to get him to the ground and find the submission. And even he had Jamie Pickett in the arm triangle for a while, and it took him a little bit to get the finish. But regardless, first round finish. Bo Nickel's done well so far early in his career. Val Woodburn getting the call on short notice. Also undefeated, 7-0. 5'8", so he's a short guy for this middleweight division. I couldn't see any reach stats for him. I checked a few websites. He's 29 years old, obviously undefeated, so his last 5 he's 5-0. This is his UFC debut, getting the call on short notice. His last fight, a unanimous decision win versus 2-6 Luis Melo. I believe that's supposed to say 22. So August 19th, 2022, for the Combat Night belt. So obviously wasn't fighting in a crazy big promotion, even something like LFA, and wasn't fighting the best competition, his last fight being a 2-6 opponent. Obviously, this is a tough fight for anyone on short notice. He said he was cutting a lot of weight. I think he said he got the call and he was like 207 or something. So, on for 3 or 4 days' notice, cutting, what is that, 15 plus 7, 22 pounds. That's a lot of weight to cut in a few days. Regardless of that, how he fights, he swings big, wild punches, not the best technique. He does have a lot of power, obviously. He's a big, stocky, strong guy. And then he'll try and get you up against the fence and get takedowns. Decent wrestling himself. But I just feel like Bo, being the bigger guy, will be able to land shots on the feet if he decides to keep it there. If Val shoots a takedown before him, I think Bo will be able to defend it. And I think Bo will be able to get a takedown of his own. Bo gets this fight done, probably with inside the distance. But it's another case like the JDM fight. The lines are crazy, so I'm probably not touching it. Bo Nickel sitting at minus 2,500. Woodburn sitting at plus 1,200. The under 1.5 sitting at minus 425. So, I mean, that's insane for an over-under, and for it to be 1.5 is crazy. And, I mean, there's a good case for it. Bo probably does get him down pretty quick and get the ground and pound. Or maybe Bo tries to strike and we see something a little different. Who knows? But if you like the over, maybe Woodburn can survive a bit because of his stockiness and size and decent wrestling himself. The over 1.5 sitting at plus 325. But like I said, I'm picking Bo, and from a betting perspective, I am not touching this fight. But next up on the main card, we've got one of my favorite fights of the night with one of my favorite fighters, Jalen Turner, fighting Dan Hooker. Jalen Turner, 13-6, 6'3", huge and long for this weight class, 77-inch reach, 28 years old, 4-1 in his last 5. His last fight being a split decision loss versus Mateusz Gamrot in March of this year. So earlier this year, a lot of people thought there was a case to give it to Jalen Turner. Live, I scored it to Jalen Turner. Watching it back a couple times for tape purposes, I do understand the scoring to Gamrot. I mean, the fight was ridiculously close. Turner was able to do good work on the feet, hurt Gamrot once, but Gamrot was able to get substantial control time on the ground. So a ridiculously close fight, but Jalen Turner doing well in a fight a lot of people thought he was going to get blown out in. I'm a big Jalen Turner fan after that. I mean, even after a few other finishes before. But it was just a good performance in a fight. Like I said, a lot of people thought he was going to get blown out in. Dan Hooker coming in 22-12, 6 feet tall, 75-inch reach, so another tall, long guy for the division. 33 years old. 2-3 in his last 5. His last fight was a round 2 KO TKO win versus Claudio Puelles in November of last year, after he was on a pretty tough run himself. Let me pull that up just so I can see. I think it was like a 3-fight losing streak, but obviously he's fighting the best of the best. Oh no, not a 3-fight losing streak, but he lost 4-5 at one point. Lost to Dustin Poirier, then Michael Chandler. Came back and beat Hack Prast, and then fought Islam and Arnold Allen, back-to-back losses. Comes back versus Claudio Puelles. So it seems like when he's fighting guys at the very top, like Poirier, Michael Chandler, Islam, Arnold Allen, at this point in his career, he can't get those wins anymore. But Hack Prast and Puelles, a little bit lower level, he's able to get the win. I think in this fight, Dan Hooker's going to be at a severe speed disadvantage and a severe power disadvantage. Obviously, Hooker uses his reach well, and he has solid striking. Like, his hands are great. But Jalen Turner, the same thing, another long striker. But just the difference is the speed Turner's going to have in the pop at the end of his shots. I'd say Hooker probably has the wrestling advantage. He uses it sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he goes straight striking, gets into brawls, and then we saw it against Hack Prast. He came out and used his wrestling pretty well in there. But I think Turner showed against Gamrot his grappling is, especially defensive grappling, is starting to level up, and I think Hooker's at the level where he would be able to handle it. He has a great guillotine, some good jiu-jitsu, good submissions of his own. So I think maybe if he hurts Hooker shoots in. Or maybe Hooker's just trying to work in the wrestling. But there are scenarios where I think Jalen Turner could find a guillotine or just a submission on the ground. And when they're on the feet, like I said, the speed and the pop from Turner, I think Turner will be able to do good work. and win wherever this fight goes. Betting wise, Turner's sitting at minus 280. Not a bad line. I do think he wins this fight at a very high clip. And like I said, I'm very confident for this one. So another piece that wouldn't be bad for parlay. The over 1.5 sitting at minus 126. I think there's a case where Turner can finish it early. We've seen Hooker get finished quick before, but I also think Hooker can drag this fight out a bit and do good work on the feet of his own, make life tough for Jalen Turner just because he is a tricky veteran. His striking is good in itself, and maybe he works the grappling a little bit to success. Who knows? The under 1.5 sitting at minus 104, so close lines both ways. I would probably slightly lean the over, and I could see Jalen Turner building up damage as the fight goes on and finding a submission or a knockout late second or in the third at some point. So I do kind of lean the over 1.5, but I could see a case for the under too. Jalen Turner inside the distance sitting at minus 150. His KO line's plus 175, his sub line is plus 200, and his decision line, which I also do think is live. I think there's a world where Hooker makes this a really tough, gritty fight for Turner, and Turner has to pull through and show how good he is and wins a decision, and it's sitting at plus 550, so it's not a bad shot either. But pick-wise, I'm definitely going Jalen Turner in this one. I like him to get this win. Next up, a fight a lot of people have been waiting for. I talked about this one in my matchups video yesterday. I think the middleweight title shot depends a lot on this fight. If Dricus wins, you probably wait and do Dricus versus Israel whenever Dricus is ready. If Rob wins again, you probably let Sean Strickland jump the line, and you do Sean Strickland versus Izzy in September. So there are a couple options. I think it depends on this fight. So big implications here for the title. Robert Whittaker, 25-6, 6 feet tall, 73.5-inch reach, 32 years old, 4-1 in his last 5. His last fight was a unanimous decision win versus Marvin Vettori in September of last year. So it's been a good 9-10 months since he's fought. Duplessis, 19-2, 6'1", 76-inch reach, 29 years old, 5-0 in his last 5. He's been great so far in the UFC. Undefeated in the UFC so far, I do believe. His last fight was a round 2 KO TKO win versus Derek Brunson in March of this year, a fight where he saw a little bit of adversity early and was able to get past it and get the finish, outwork Derek Brunson. But Dricus du Plessis is a guy who, it feels like the manner in which he fights, he sees adversity in every fight. And he's a guy that just knows how to win. He gets the fight done, he bites down on his mouth guard and finds a way to win. He's had dominant performances too, but it seems like there's always a part of the fight where he has to tough it out to find the win. He's a guy who has insane big power on the feet. His striking is getting better and better, like technique-wise and timing-wise and that kind of deal. Obviously, he's got the power. He's definitely open defensively on the feet. There's holes everywhere defensively. He can be hit to the body, which his gas tank hasn't been the best. He did get some sort of nose surgery, which they're saying they hope it helps with his breathing, which will help his gas tank. Who knows? We'll have to see. If anybody's going to make you have to show your gas tank, it's Rob Whittaker. And just talking about how open he is on the feet, obviously, we've seen him, I won't say get like hurt, but there have been points where he's been kind of stung before on the feet versus guys like Derek Brunson. I think Derek Brunson hit him pretty hard a few times. And then offensively and defensively, he's a solid grappler. Good jiu-jitsu. He has very good jiu-jitsu and good offensive and solid defensive wrestling as well. Robert Whittaker, on the feet, he, I would say, is the much cleaner, more technical, more patient striker. He puts together combinations in a much more technical way than like a big swinging violent way. Whittaker's jab is elite. His movement is elite. He's a guy who gets hurt in not every fight, but most fight, where he'll eat a big shot and either survive it or get finished. We saw Yoel Romero hurt him a bunch of times. Izzy's hurt him in both times they fought. One time even got the knockout finish. Even hurt him earlier in that fight before the finish. Hurt him in the last one. Marvin Vettori never really stung him too bad. But, yeah, just a guy that tends to get stung from time to time and tough it out. Great offensive wrestling, great defensive wrestling, and I wouldn't say his jiu-jitsu is up to the level of Duplessis, but solid jiu-jitsu himself. Never really shows it, though. I just think with how clean and technical and smart Rob Whittaker is, he can use fight IQ to his advantage here. And I think he'll be able to kind of weather the storm from Duplessis, and we'll see how Duplessis' gas tank holds up, because we've seen him look dead and tired in round 3 and have to will it out in round 3, but Whittaker is always there and bouncing and has plenty of energy in round 3, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, just for that's a big fact in it, but the technique, the fight IQ, the timing, I like Rob Whittaker in this one. I think he'll be able to hurt Duplessis, maybe find the finish, maybe not. Both guys are quite tough. Both guys are able to be hurt and tough it out, so that'll be interesting. Regardless, I think Whittaker gets the win, finish or not. For these last 3 fights, I wrote down quite a bit of lines just so I can talk about a few of them so I have some to remember. Whittaker's sitting at minus 400 right now. I am pretty confident in him winning. I probably, even at minus 400, won't throw him in a parlay, because there is definitely a path to victory for Duplessis here if he knocks out Robert Whittaker cold early. Don't be surprised. He carries power late into the fight, and maybe his cardio is getting better. Who knows? But yeah, there is definitely a world where Duplessis knocks out Whittaker or hurts him and is able to find a submission in some way. But yeah, minus 400 is a bit steep in this fight. I am confident in Whittaker finding the win, though. The under 2.5 is sitting at minus 160, over at plus 130. I think Duplessis could win a decision, but I think it would weigh a lot on him hurting Whittaker and Whittaker being tough and surviving. Because if it is a cleaner fight where Rob Whittaker's getting the fight he wants, and Duplessis is not able to hurt him, I would have a harder time seeing Duplessis winning a decision that way. That would lean more towards Rob. But that is where I could see Rob winning a decision, so the over 2.5, I think, is a decent shout if you think both guys can tough it out. I mean, I could even be leaned towards the under. Fight goes the distance, plus 130. Fight doesn't go the distance, minus 160. Whittaker KO, plus 135. DDP inside the distance, plus 400. I've written down a bunch of lines. Drickus KO, plus 450. Whittaker round 2, plus 500. Whittaker round 3, plus 650. Some early DDP KO lines, round 1, plus 1,000. Round 2, plus 1,500. These are all just lines, I think, where there could be action there. Like, I think Whittaker's live for a finish late, Duplessis live for a finish early. Both guys live for a finish, both guys live for this. This is going to be a really fun fight. Regardless of what bets you go with, I do have Robert Whittaker winning pick-wise. I'm going with Whittaker. Next up, co-main event, flyweight title on the line. Brandon Moreno coming for another defense here versus Alexander Pantoja, who has bested him 2 times before, one time finishing him on The Ultimate Fighter, I believe in round 2 with a submission, rear naked choke, and the second time beating him up and winning dominantly in a decision. The next time they fought, which was actually just inside the UFC. Both guys take very different paths in their careers, but they meet again here for the title. This will be the most important time they've fought. Brandon Moreno, 21, 6-2, 5'7", 70-inch reach, 29 years old, 3-1-1. His last fight was a round 3 TKO, doctor stoppage-ish kind of deal. Win versus Davison Figueiredo in January of this year. Alexander Pantoja, 25-5, 5'5", 67.5-inch reach, 33 years old, 4-1 in his last 5. His last fight was a round 1 submission win versus Alex Perez in July of last year, so just about a year since he fought. Not quite, but pretty close. This is a very interesting fight because obviously since the last time they fought, Brandon Moreno's had an up and down career. Left the UFC, came back, and has had a much more successful second run. He's improved tremendously in every facet of the game since they've last fought. And I think I wouldn't say Pantoja has expanded or like gotten better as a fighter, in the sense of adding more skills and stuff. But I would say since that time, Pantoja's gotten plenty of experience and has sharpened all the things he was good at. So both guys improving in different ways. It'll be a much different fight. Like I said, experience plays a huge role in this one. But I'm going with Alexander Pantoja to get it done again. I think the leg kicks he throws, I think he can chop down Moreno. I think the aggression he brings early, he's going to be throwing big punches. We've seen Brandon Moreno get hurt in almost every single fight versus Figueiredo. I think Pantoja can land big shots and sting Moreno on the feet. We know how good Pantoja is if he can find her back on the ground. We've seen him dominate Moreno there before. Obviously, Moreno's gotten better, but I just think Pantoja is the elite of the elite on the ground with that big punching power, with how aggressive he is early. If he doesn't get Moreno out early, I think he can do well. Like I said, chopping down the legs, win rounds early. He can slow down as the fight goes on. I don't know if we've ever seen him in a 5-round atmosphere. I can't remember. I know I looked at it earlier, but I can't remember off the top of my head if he's gone 5 rounds before, or even been in a 5-round fight. He probably has, but we've seen him slow in 3-round fights before, so it'll be interesting to see. I just think, like I said, the aggression, how powerful he is, the leg kicks, the grappling advantage. I believe he can win rounds early if he doesn't find the finish early, and then survive Moreno bringing on a big onslaught late in the fight, and continue to do good work late in the fight. I like Pantoja to get this one done. Same thing as last one. I wrote down just a bunch of different lines. I'll read them all out and then talk about a few. Pantoja plus 180, under 3.5 plus 145, over 3.5 minus 175. Fight goes the distance minus 105. Doesn't go the distance minus 125. Pantoja inside the distance plus 310. Moreno inside the distance plus 185. Moreno KO plus 240. Submission plus 900. Decision plus 210. Pantoja KO plus 1000. Sub plus 275. Decision plus 500. And then I wrote down some lines for when I think they're most live for the finish. Obviously, I think either guy could get it finished at any time. They're both really dangerous, but Moreno 345 plus 900 plus 1200 plus 1400. Pantoja 123 plus 900 plus 1100 plus 1600. If you like the finish, there are some great lines. If you like the decision, both guys sitting at pretty good lines. Plus 210 for Moreno, plus 500 for Pantoja. So I think this is more a fight about gauging how long you think it can go, if the finish is live or not, if you favor it, and whoever you favor, finding the angle that way. Pantoja, like I said, early finish or the decision line is pretty solid for him if you think he can win rounds early and survive late. And Moreno, if you think he can survive early, there's a finish late for him, and obviously he can win a decision here. So lots of good angles to take in this fight. Just depends on who you think's going to win. I'm going with the underdog, Alexander Pantoja, to win their third fight and take the flyweight belt. Next up, main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez. Volk trying to continue to cement his legacy as one of the best fighters ever and possibly take that undisputed best 145 featherweight fighter, best of all time. Volk 25-2, 5'6", 71.5 inch reach, 34 years old, 4-1 in his last 5. Round 2 submission, loss. Oh no, that was I didn't change it. That was for Josh Emmett. Just because I adjusted it because that's who Rodriguez fought last. But that's supposed to say Volk's last fight was a unanimous decision loss versus Islam Makhachev when Volk was going up to try and become double champ at 155 pounds. Yair Rodriguez on the other side, 16-3, 5'11", 71 inch reach, 30 years old, 3-1-1 in his last 5. his last fight was a round 2 submission win versus Josh Emmett in February of this year for the interim belt. Now coming to fight Volkanovski to try and unify and take home the undisputed belt. Volk trying to defend it. This is another one where I think it's kind of like the Moreno-Pantoja one. If you like Yair, you're looking for early finish, or if he can win rounds early and stick it out late, the decision line would be pretty good for Yair if you think that's possible. And Volk, obviously he could win a decision in this one. There's a chance he could get the finish early, but I think the much more likely thing is he finds a finish later wearing on Yair. The head kicks are going to be there for Rodriguez. Obviously, we know how good and creative the striking and specifically the kicking from Yair Rodriguez is. We've seen Volkanovski susceptible to kicks before. Max Holloway hurt him with a head kick. And just his height and the way in which he comes in, kind of leaning with his head forward, the kicks are going to be there for Yair Rodriguez. But I think Volk is smart enough to know that's what Yair's... I mean, obviously anyone, if you're going in to fight Yair, you know he's going to be throwing kicks. But I think Volk is smart enough to game plan that Yair is going to be looking specifically for that head kick, kind of in the same way Max Holloway did, following up a nice combination over the top. And he'll be able to survive how dangerous Yair Rodriguez is early, and the storm he brings early. And Yair will slow down as the fight goes. Obviously, he's dangerous at any round. We saw the crazy up elbow knockout against Chan Sung-jung, the Korean zombie, in round 5, literal buzzer beater as he was going to lose a decision, or at least most likely. You never know with judges. But like I said, I favor Volk in this one. I think his boxing is elite. He throws good leg kicks too, and I think if he can disguise those, he can do good work getting in close with his boxing and finding leg kicks to hurt Yair's legs, because obviously he's going to be throwing big kicks himself, so his legs will be sore. Volk will have the big wrestling advantage here. Obviously, Yair is dangerous from the bottom. We saw the submission versus Josh Emmett. So that is always live for Yair, but we know how good at defending submissions Volkanovski is versus Brian Ortega, a much more dangerous submission artist. He was able to survive 2 really deep locked-in chokes, get out of them, and continue to put on the onslaught and win the fight. I think Volk can do the same here. Avoid all danger from Yair, use his boxing, get in close. He's got to get inside the kicking range. Even employ that wrestling a little bit, do good work on top. We know how good Volk's ground and pound is. I think he finds a late finish. I could also see the decision, but I really do like Volk to continue to just greaten his legacy, show how good he is, and prove he's the best 145er of all time. Bet-wise, Volk at -400. Again, the knockout's there. Yair is one of the most dangerous guys in this division. So the line is a bit crazy. I do see people parlaying it. People will totally end up parlaying this, and I'm not mad at it either. I'm pretty confident in Volk, but I probably won't be doing it. The under 4.5's -130. I think that's a good line. If you like Yair, or if you're kind of in the same boat as me, thinking Volk can bring a big onslaught late. So if you can find that late finish, if you think it goes to decision, over 4.5 at +100. A bit risky. Fight goes the distance and fight doesn't go the distance, both at -115. Volk inside the distance +160. Yair inside the distance +450. Volk KO or sub +195 or +900. Decision +125. Yair KO or sub +500 +1000. So some really good lines finishing wise for Yair, and the decision sitting at +900. Really good lines if you want to try and predict how Yair wins if you're on his side. Volk, I kind of did the same thing as last time. Volk to find the finish late, rounds 3, 4, 5, +1000, +1200, +1600. Even though Yair is dangerous in any round, we've seen him get the late finishes before. I do think he's the most dangerous early. So Yair 1, 2, 3, +1100, +1600, +2000. There's some good lines there. It's kind of like that Moreno fight. Judge how long you think the fight's going to go, who you think's going to win, and find that angle. However you're reading the fight, how you feel it's going to go. Like I said, I'm leaning Volkanovski late finish. There are a couple lines in there that are pretty solid. I may end up taking a shot on, but pick-wise, Volkanovski. Stacked great card here. Let's get into the Savage Rounds Parlay. So I put a little tracker up in the top right so we can see. We lost last week. It was the first loss in a while. I talked about it in the recap video a little bit. So we're now 11-8 plus. We're still in the plus for profit, so that's good. Positive 3.37 units. We lost last week, so the streak is 1 loss. And our best streak was just previous to this loss, 5 wins in a row. This weekend, a lot of big lines, a lot of lopsided lines, other than some close fights. I considered Ribovics in this one. I do really think he gets the win. I think he's much better than Cam Wellakirk, but he is still quite a big unknown in this division. He looked good versus Loic in a loss, so yeah, like I said, still a lot of questions, so I ended up shying away from him and picked 2 guys I feel I can trust a bit more. First one, I'm going with Vitor Petrino, I think, versus Prachnio. He could find the big shot on the feet. He can use the wrestling to his advantage, and I think he gets Prachnio out of there inside 2. Maybe it goes into the 3rd if Petrino decides to go wrestling heavy. But regardless, I like Petrino. I think he finds the finish in this one. Sitting at minus 265. Like I said, a lot of the lines were juiced here, so we're not getting... Unfortunately, normally we try and get plus odds for this Savage Rounds parlay, but this week it's just in the favorites. Next up, Jalen Turner, minus 280 sitting. I was sitting at minus 280. I don't know, I was going to say it twice. But like I said, Jalen Turner, even though Dan Hooker is a long fighter himself, Jalen Turner still has the reach. I think Jalen Turner will have a huge advantage here in the pop on the end of his shots and the speed in his shots. I think as the fight goes on, he continue to build up the striking, land good shots, slowly start to wear down Dan Hooker. Maybe Hooker shoots late, and Turner's able to find a submission. Who knows? I think defensively, grappling-wise, Turner has continued to get better, and if Hooker decides to employ that wrestling, can either find a submission defensively or just defend it and keep it on the feet and continue to outstrike Hooker. But the pop at the end of Turner's shots and the speed is what's going to win this fight for him, whether he finds the finish or not. Both of these guys parlay for minus 115, so if this hits, we'll get to add on like 0.9 units to the profit. But hopefully we can make it 12-8. Great card this weekend. Really excited to see how it plays out. See you guys Tuesday for the recap of 290, and Wednesday for the matchmaking, and then Thursday for next week's predictions and bets video. Drop a like on this one for me and subscribe. I will see you guys next week. Peace out.